Hi, Arise family. Welcome to Joshua 6. Today we're going to be talking about the walls of Jericho falling. But before we get into today's study, I want to remind you that we have a resource available to you over on Kandi, Nicole, arise.com. Go underneath study guides, and there's a study guide available for each day that we are covering, each chapter here in Joshua. So these study guides are going to help you to get deeper into the word. Is going to help you to ask some questions, apply the word to your life. Because reading the word is great, but if you have no way to apply it, then it's not going to stick with you. All right. So you guys go check out that resource over on CandyNicoleArise.com. So let's get into the word. I am going to be reading today from the Christian Standard Bible. It's called The Conquest of Jericho, is what mine is entitled, okay? Now Jericho was strongly fortified because of the Israelites, no one leaving or entering. The Lord said to Joshua, "Look, I have handed Jericho and its kings and best soldiers over to you. March around the city with all the men of war, circling the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns, trumpets, in front of the ark. But on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times while the priests blow the ram's horn. When their prolonged blast of the horn, and you hear the sound, have all the troops give a mighty shout. Then the wall will collapse, and the troops will advance, each man straight ahead." So Joshua, son of Nun, summoned the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant and have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord." He said to the troops, "Move forward, march around the city, and have the armed men go ahead of the ark of the Lord." After Joshua had spoken to the troops, 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns before the Lord moved forward and blew the ram's horns. The ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. While the ram's horns were blowing, the armed men went in front of the priests, who blew the ram's horn, and the rear guard went behind the ark. But Joshua had commanded the troops, "Do not shout or let your voice be heard. Do not let one word come out of your mouth until the time I say shout. Then you are to shout." So the ark of the Lord was carried around the city, circling it once. They returned to the camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning. Let's stop here, okay? So the Lord gives instructions, all right? Joshua from verse 1 to 2, all right? The Lord is telling Joshua that he's going to give him the victory, all right? Verses 3 to 5, he tells him what to do, all right? His instructions are odd, okay? Why are they odd? Because that is not the way you normally go about winning a war, okay? There's other things that you normally do when you're getting prepared for a war. You don't march around the city with the Ark of the Covenant. That's never been heard of before. Reason why I'm talking to you like this is because there's things that the Lord is going to ask you to do that don't seem like this is how you get the victory. God, this is unheard of. Why would I do this when it seems I should do that? Okay? But sometimes the Lord gives us instructions that only he understands. It's because his ways are above our ways and his thoughts are above our thoughts. Okay? And also in these situations like this, he is getting all the glory. This is not the normal way to fight a war. You don't march around the city quietly with the Ark of the Covenant. You don't blow horns and scream real loud and walls fall down. Who ever heard of such a thing? But many times I think, man, what was Joshua thinking? But then didn't Joshua see all the miracles that happened before? But at the same time, it doesn't really matter with these Israelites. They've seen miracle after miracle after miracle, but they're always scared. And many times we are the Israelites. We are the ones that the Lord has worked miracle after miracle out for us and took us out of impossible situation. Yet we find ourselves in another one and we're telling the Lord, well, I don't see how you gonna get me out of this one. Because this one here, I don't see. But didn't you not see how I was gonna get you out of all the other ones? This is where you need to set your little trophy case up. Okay? Your trophy case is all the victories that the Lord has taken you out of. All right? That's when you go and you open that closet and you say, you know, all these other times, there's things he told me that did not make sense exactly. But some kind of way, he always worked it out for me. In some kind of way, Joshua understands that the Lord is working this out for them. No, this is not the normal way we go about fighting the war, but hey, Jesus said, God said, and I will follow the voice of the Lord, okay? So then Joshua goes and tells the Israelites this. Y'all already know what they thinking, but okay. We did just cross over with that ark, you know, and normally that ark is just in the tent, and we can't go in the tent. But it's out on display and it's carrying us around, and we had put the stones in the Jordan to remind us, and we set up the memorial stones in the last town we just came out of. And this ark, yeah, this is the Spirit of the Lord moving for us. So let's do what Joshua says, thus says the Lord, right? So they walk around on this first day and they don't say nothing. Did y'all catch that? Not a peep was said to these people. They walked around that wall, went back to camp, and nobody said nothing. Okay? Then we're going to pick up here in verse 12. It says, Joshua got up early the next morning. The priests took the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests carried 7 ram's horns, marched in front of the ark of the Lord. While the ram's horns were blowing, the armed men went in front of them, and the rear guard went behind the ark of the covenant. On the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. Early on the 7th day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times in the same way. That was the only day they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priest blew the ram's horn, and Joshua said to the troops, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. But the city and everything in it are set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone with her in the house will live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. I want to stop here. This is a warning, okay? So this is the first city that they're going in and they're conquering, all right? This is the first fruits. This is set apart. First of all, it's set apart. The Lord is destroying this place, all right? But all the gold and the things that are collected, that is for the Lord, okay? And what we're going to see later is the Lord's going to give them some things. We're going to see a few things happen later on, actually. Just hold on to this. There's a reason why I'm bringing this up and highlighting it. And tomorrow we're going to probably get a little bit more into it, okay? But in particular, today I want to highlight to you how it's being mentioned to us that this city is set apart, okay, for destruction. But the city and everything in it are set apart for the Lord's destruction. Only Rahab, the prostitute, and everyone in her house will live, okay? It says in verse 18, but keep yourselves from the things set apart. It's a warning, okay? Or you will be set apart for destruction, just like this place. So he's telling these people, I don't care if you see some pretty things, leave it right where it is, okay? Because it's set apart for destruction. And if you take these things, there's a price to pay. There's a warning that went out. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction and make trouble for it. Another part of the warning. For all the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury. This is the first fruits that are being given to the Lord, the first victory, okay? So in verse 20 it says, so the troops shouted and the ram's horns sounded. When they heard the blast of the ram's horns, the troops gave a great shout, and the wall collapsed. The troops advanced into the city, each man straight ahead, and they captured the city. They completely destroyed everything in the city with the sword, every man and woman, both young and old, and every ox, sheep, and donkey. Everything was utterly destroyed, other than Rahab and her household. Okay? So, let's get into what happened with Rahab, which ends up being Boaz's mama. Okay? She also ends up being in the lineage of King David, which is the lineage of Jesus Christ. All right? And I want to point out again, Rahab, how do they say her name every time she's mentioned? Rahab the prostitute. The Lord can redeem anyone. All right? So Rahab and her family are spared. In verse 22, it says, Joshua said to the two men who had scouted the land, go to the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of there, and all who were with her, just as you swore to her. So the young men who had scouted went in and brought out Rahab and her father, mother, brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out the whole family, and they settled them outside the camp of Israel. They burned the city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her father's family and all who belonged to her, because she had hid the messengers Joshua had sent to the spies of Jericho, and she still lives in Israel today. At that time, Joshua imposed this curse. The man who undertakes the rebuilding of this city, Jericho, is cursed before the Lord. He will lay its foundations at the cost of his firstborn. He will finish its gates at the cost of his youngest. Verse 27 says, and the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Back to Miss Rahab. Every time they mention her name, they say Rahab the prostitute. Go get the prostitute. All right, every single time. This is, like I said, a great example of God's redemption and how he can redeem anyone. Not only was she a prostitute, but she grew up in this culture that just was completely opposite of what it is that the God we serve stands for. Okay, so Rahab was against, her culture was against everything that God was doing. False gods, okay? But yet she was spared, camped among the camp of Israel, and like I said, put into the lineage of Jesus Christ later on. Now in verse 26, it talks about this curse, okay, that Joshua speaks up out of his mouth. And I want to let you know that the Lord allowed this to have power and authority, what it is he spoke out of his mouth concerning Jericho. Okay, so in 1 Kings 16:34, it says, during his reign, okay, talking about reign of a king, all right, Heli the Bethlehemite built Jericho at the cost of Abram, his firstborn. He laid its foundation, and at the cost of Segrum, his youngest, he finished its gates, according to the word of the Lord he had spoken through Joshua, son of Nun. So there was a curse that was put on this land, and the Lord honored what it is that he spoke through Joshua the prophet concerning what would happen. It was a foreshadowing of things to come. And that's something that we continue to see in Joshua. We've also saw this over in Deuteronomy and Exodus, when Moses would speak something out of his mouth and then it would happen. So the same thing is happening here with Joshua. The Lord is foreshadowing things. He's prophesying through Joshua things to come. And so even this, we see it happening later on in 1 Kings 16 verses 34. So I encourage you to go over to CandyNicoleArise.com and get your study guide for chapter 6. Sit down with this word and ask the Lord to allow the Holy Spirit to speak to you and minister to you as you get into your word. See you tomorrow for chapter 7.